Fantastic. And we also have Justice Stratton on the line. Justice Stratton, you want to introduce yourself quickly?
Okay. Yes, I'm just retired Justice Stratton, and I was going through some old notes and noted that I started working on competency issues, which are very related to AOT, in 2006, and had a whole file on it at that point, and then just didn't get anywhere until working with Betsy and some of the partners, we got the changes to our AOT statute that overcame some of the objections judges were using to say they couldn't do what we thought they could do, and a couple courts were doing, such as the judge in Butler County. And so once we started really working on AOT with Betsy, when she moved to the Treatment Advocacy Center, I had this sort of eureka moment that maybe AOT might be a way we could really help deal with some of our competency cases that don't need full hospitalization. So we are on the cusp of passing a bill. I just heard from Senator Gavarone this morning and talked to her yesterday, and it looks like, knock on wood, it's going to pass in lame duck. And it fixes some of the legal hurdles, such as probate court saying that they can't really reveal information back to the trial judge or the prosecutor if they don't stick with the program because of privacy laws and things like that, which I know Judge Stormer has found a workaround out around, but a lot of the judges will again throw those barriers up as ours did. So we fixed some of the hurdles, and it's not perfect. It's a sausage making bill, but it gives us a lot more ability to use AOT. And now I just talked to the Director of Mental Health, Lori Chris, who has been a real partner. Her department's been a real partner in trying to get this bill passed. And we're going to now keep our committee intact that worked on the legal issues of the bill to try to work on the treatment issues. We really have to then solve the crisis centers and the treatment follow-up and all those issues to give judges the support for any AOT they do. So that's what we're calling phase 2. So that's a quick update of what's been happening here. And Betsy's been a huge part of all of these efforts.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And just for everybody's benefit, Justice Stratton is a retired justice on the Ohio Supreme Court, and has been obviously as you're hearing, a real leader on trying to fix some of the systemic things going on in Ohio, and also has been very helpful to us in getting Ohio to the point, working with Betsy to where Ohio is now one of the states that has implemented AOT in pretty much all the major population centers. It's one of our real success stories. So great to have you. I see that we have Judge Anderson from California has joined on. You want to just quickly say hi and introduce yourself, Judge?
Good morning, good afternoon, whatever it is.
Even for you, it's afternoon.
Yeah, Judge Tom Anderson, Nevada County, California. We implemented AOT in 2008, and slowly the other counties in the state are joining in.
We're getting there. Terrific. Well, thank you all so much for being a part of this today. And I think probably a good place to start is to just give the 3 judges who are part of the new grant-funded programs. I would just love if each of you could just tell us a little about how you feel things are going. I know with Judge Strelitz, your program is not under the AOT specific grant, right? You guys have a grant to do CCBHCs, community-based behavioral health centers, where AOT is a component of it. So I'm not sure what kind of deadlines you guys are under or what expectations you're under to have the program, up and running by a certain point or meeting certain benchmarks. Maybe you can tell us a little about that. But our other 2 are under an expectation to have their programs up and running by basically 2 days ago, December 1st. And I know that both of you guys are ahead of that schedule, unlike some of our grantees. But maybe Justice Strelitz, you'd like to go first. Just tell us how you feel like things are going so far.
Sure. I think they're going pretty well. I think at this point, so over a 2-year period, we're supposed to have 90 patients. And at this point, we've been doing this for maybe a month. We've got about 5 or 6. Actually, today we heard our first patient. We heard from our first patient who agreed to a second 90 days in our program.
Great.
It was kind of nice.
Yeah.
And he seems to really be doing well and was very coherent and it looks like things are going very, very well for him. The first patient that we introduced to the program is having some difficulty, and we're going to mod him back in. But short of that, I think everybody else is doing okay.
That's great.
There's a learning curve, you know.
Yeah. And the legal process has gone pretty smooth so far with the petitions and terms.
I think so. We had the meeting that we had with Judge Kazin was really helpful.
Yeah.
Cleared up a lot of things for me. This morning, when we were doing our mental health docket, our first patient was an AOT, and we had a very lengthy discussion about the appropriate waiver. So yeah, we're working out the kinks, and I think it sounds like a great program, and I'd love to not see some of the folks that come through our mental health docket on a pretty regular basis. I'd love to not see them again. So
Right.
that's what I hope happens.
That's the idea. Okay. Thank you so much. Judge Burke, how are things going in Louisville so far?
We actually were kind of really anticipating, very excited to start and get off the ground. So we had been talking about it so much for so long. When we were able to, got the word that we were going to have the grant and have the funding on the treatment side, that just really changed things, because on the court side, we already kind of had the mechanism in place. It just, there wasn't any funding on the other side. And so now that the funding is there, we had done a case before where we had kind of pieced those services together just by cooperation of some community providers, and had supervised a client. So we kind of knew what it looked like. And so like Judge Strelitz, our numbers are low, but we have a lot of people in the pipeline. We've monitored our, I'm the only person doing the mental health dockets now. And we have 2 dockets a week, and we have about 25 to anywhere between 25 to 35 hearings on each of those days. And about between 60 and 80% of the people on those dockets are eligible under our statute. Our statute is very broad, as opposed to the original version of our statute only allowed people to be eligible for AOT if they had had a full 60-day commitment under our mental health statute twice in the last 12 months. Wow. Our new statute allows people to be eligible for AOT if they have had 2 hospitalizations at all under our 202 statute in the last 24 months. And this puts the ball in the doctor's courts, in the team's court, or to basically identify candidates who are good candidates. And so with that kind of broad spectrum of who we can look at, we're looking at a lot of different people, probably more so than in other jurisdictions. And we are, I think we're really identifying some people who will benefit. So we're excited in that the assessment process on the other side is getting the kinks worked out. But we have it in place. It's just we need them to come.
Right.
They will.
They will.
I'd be curious to hear from Judge Stormer about what she thinks makes a good candidate, because everybody who's on an inpatient automatically converts to outpatient at this point.
Right. That's because the Ohio criteria make that possible, right? So Ohio is a state that has one set of criteria for civil commitment, and it's just a question of what is this person's level of need right now. You can reach a point where you are still dangerous to yourself or others, but the hospital is no longer the least restrictive appropriate setting. So that gives Judge Stormer the opportunity to step everybody down as they come off their inpatient commitments, which you can't do in the other states represented here.
So as I was saying, I imagine there are folks that you get that wouldn't be appropriate, and there's no screening process before they get to your court.
Well, it's not quite that haphazard. We designed ours, and Judge Burke, I don't know if I met you or not. I remember meeting a judge from Louisville. You had a criminal court docket too, right?
Yes, we met. Yes.
In Detroit.
Detroit, yeah.
Yeah, and so, you know, in a way, I kind of like what you guys do because you can move people very easily back and forth, right? If they meet criteria between criminal and civil. So you can pluck them from criminal. We can't do that. We have a separate system. So our court looks, and we have about 117 people currently in our court because it's been around for a long time. But we take everybody with the thought that it's going to look and feel like a drug court, which is a different model from a lot of the other courts. So our people all see each other. We are struggling with what we're doing now because the COVID is very high in my county. But they all get to see the people who graduate, the people who are doing well at the beginning, and then the people who are struggling get to see people who've succeeded. And then the people who are really struggling get to see that some of the people who have been struggling a little bit are getting the help that they need. So it's a different kind of program because we don't have the funding to do, we never got a SAMHSA grant. We didn't have the funding to be able to bring like teams of specialized treatment people in. We like the program because even though not everyone is a high utilizer, some people are first time users, we can catch them before they start to fall again. So you're a first timer, but you're heading towards being a higher needs person than we might have originally thought. It's the same with the drug addicts. We had people who the first time they were arrested turned out to have a much more serious problem. They just had never been arrested. So these are people who might have a very serious and has been a chronic mental illness, but they just never entered our system. So we like taking everybody for that reason. And if they do well, we're able to move them quickly after 90 days, literally back out into the community. But they now know where the provider is, that they have a case manager, et cetera. So we're hoping to stave off the higher utilizer by working with the first time and perhaps, you know, the second time or third time through the system, and not just taking the people who've been through, you know, 6, 8, 10 times. So does that answer your question, Amy?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. You know, one of the things I wondered and kind of worried about, Judge Burke, with the Kentucky law that, you know, as you know, TAC was kind of involved in helping to draft, but the fact that we have that provision there that says that a person has to lack insight, basically the word anosognosia is in your law.
And that is our hang up right now, because what's happening, our doctors at the state hospital are either that or the least restrictive. What they are doing is they are excluding people who have insight into their illness. They're saying they know they need it. They just, you know, so there pretty much has to be somebody that we really need to get that out of there.
Yeah, we'll work with you on that.
Yes. And then the second thing is the least restrictive language. They are being really, if they have not had ACT services before, which are, I don't know if you have ACT services, but it's a basically in-home services where the treatment, our community health provider basically does all of the services in the home of the individual. If they've never had that before, they're saying, well, they have to try that without the AOT first before they try it with it.
Mm-hmm.
So what's happening is the people we're getting that they're saying are AOT eligible, that they're choosing to be, you know, to file the petitions on, are all people who have had ACT services and failed. So we're getting the ones who have really failed treatment, you know, are really, really difficult. So I think we might want to get a little bit more, kind of tilt that a bit, but
yeah.
We're definitely, you know, learning the nuances.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is if you feel like there were people who would really benefit from the help of a court order,
yes,
can't get to that point with until they fail more.
Right.
You know, that's not really helping anybody. It's
no.
Opportunities to do more with this law. Yeah, okay, thank you. That's it. Judge Parsons, how are things going with Mach 2 in Houston?
Well, we have a lot more people than we did on 1.0.
Yeah,
Good. And, you know, we've had some successes and we've had some less than successful candidates. And so we're learning from each one and trying to figure out what the perfect AOT candidate looks like. And what I'm learning is that there is no such thing. And, you know, really just trying to figure out, you know, what works for these patients. And of course, that's not a one, you know, it would be easier if we had a pattern for everyone that we could just slap on them and it would work, but it doesn't work that way. So
of course.
the case managers are, you know, post-COVID has created all kinds of other challenges. I'm sure you guys have seen that as well. So like, I think we've had about 30 total around from beginning until now.
Starting when?
From when we started 2.0.
Yeah, but starting when? What? How long?
Let's see, I think we officially went live was maybe June of last year. That was
Okay.
pre-grant.
Yeah.
Right now, I think we have about 15 active as of yesterday, and we've had some graduations. You know, some either from the temporary, or I think we had one from an extended. She actually didn't stay the entire extended 12 months because the doctors felt like she had improved so much that she really didn't need us anymore. So that was exciting because she was very different from when she started than when she went out. You know, she's now got an apartment and she's looking for a job and she's got her benefits started. And, you know, what's interesting is, and that this program to me provides a lot of just some basic practical resources for these people that they struggle to get, which is then inhibiting their success, right? Just from, okay, the person couldn't seem to get their way to get an ID, which then prohibited them from getting resources, which then prohibited them from going to the doctor and getting medications, right? So the fact that the case managers are able to provide that type of assistance just sets them up for a better success rate. But then we've had some cases where, you know, they're literally jumping on trains to get away from us. And so we're actually trying that particular patient again because he showed back up and we were able to locate him. So it's the ones that are physically elusive that have been found to be more challenging, the ones where we can locate and kind of keep our hands on them.
Yeah. So one of the issues I know that you guys have been dealing with, because, you know, the conversations we've been having is that, you know, the struggle over how often do we want to make people come back to court? How much is, you know, what's the right balance of, you know, harassing a person versus making sure we're actually keeping, you know, good tabs on them.
Yeah.
If the 3 judges we have here who've been doing AOT a while could maybe speak to their own feelings on what that kind of sweet spot is and how often you like to see people. Judge Anderson, you want to take that one first?
Sure. What I usually do is after the order is issued, I have them come back the following week just to make, and I phrase that to the client as, I want to make sure you're getting the services we've ordered you to get and that you've agreed to use. And after that, I sort of consult with the treatment provider because they best know the person's discomfort or not with coming to court, or whether it's a motivator. So in most of my cases, when they first join in and get an order, they come back the first week in most cases, and then I do every 2 weeks for a couple until I'm comfortable that they are engaged and staying engaged. And then it depends on the person. It's usually 3, 4, sometimes 5 weeks, but never more than usually 4.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, perfect. Is that, Judge McGowan, is that pretty consistent with what you guys are doing?
It is. You know, we try that kind of early preliminary conversation, and typically it's 3 to 4 weeks, unless the treatment team thinks, you know, we need to do it sooner. And as Judge Anderson said, we kind of leave everything up to them to tell us, you know, to bring us in when they think we're the most effective. Because I don't want to interfere in what the team does, because they are phenomenal at working with these folks.
Right. And
They can get tired of us in a hurry, I think.
Yeah, no, it's a delicate balance for sure. And how about at New Day Court in Akron? How often are people coming in?
It's the same. We just meet every other week, so exactly the same. We do tell them that compliance, just like in a drug court, which I was a drug court judge for many years and a mental health court judge before I became a probate judge. We do tell them, though, that you can earn not coming to see me, that you can, a benefit to compliance with treatment and participation means you just don't have to see me as much. So we have people, particularly the ones on the 3-month in Vegas Astana, who come once every 3 months, and they tend to be the very high utilizers, and they tend to be part of our program for 2 years and sometimes more.
I want to add something, that some of our people who are doing well, we still have them come quite frequently, every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks, simply because they sort of benefit from that interaction with the court. The black robe effect has an impact on them. So it doesn't take up much of our time to allow them to come, even if it's, as a treatment measure, isn't really necessary, but it's continued encouragement. And I use it just to thank them for coming to give me good news, because most of my day isn't a good news. So I thank them for bringing me good news. But
Yeah.
so
And
we
they
have
love to do that too, I'm sure.
frequently. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. So that I think gives you a sense that probably everyone would agree that having people come in once a week is overkill, right? It could backfire to keep having that kind of demand on people's time, especially in a place like Harris County, where it's just such a hassle to get downtown. It's such a big county with bad traffic.
What do you think about calling them, since we are in this
Well,
this
so
platform?
what's interesting about that is, pre-COVID, they were coming into, we have 2 courts, one in downtown and one is at the psych center. And so they were coming down to the psych center, our courtroom there. But, as you said, Harris County is so large, it really doesn't matter where you're going. It's always a drive. And so, but post-COVID, we've, had to get creative. And so, because the courthouses were physically closed for a bit, we started doing phone calls. And then now that case managers have been doing a good job of it, setting up Zoom, so that I could actually have face-to-face with the clients. And while some of that is maybe not as effective on some patients, what we learned is that some of that is actually very helpful to the patients, because they don't have to spend all day in the car, in a van coming down, going through security, sitting with the other patients, getting agitated. Some of the patients actually benefit this way, and they respond better than in person. And so that's just something for the future that we've just stumbled upon that seems to work for some people. And so the weekly concept really originally derived from 1.0, when there were a lot of service provider issues where the patients weren't getting what they were supposed to be getting. And so the court was sort of the, not really helping to make sure that those things were happening. And that just sort of stuck with 2.0. And so realizing and hearing that, listen, that might be too much, is, something to really consider, because if we've used it, like I think, Judge Anderson, you said, you use it as okay, if you're doing really well, that means you don't have to see me as much. And we've done that as well, where if somebody's doing really well, they get their reward is, okay, they see me every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks. But interestingly enough, the patient that graduated that we had a really high success rate with, when it was offered for her to come to court every week, she said, no, I want to come see you, because if I don't come see you, and those are her words, if I don't come see you, I don't get what I'm supposed to get from these people. Is what she So to her, I was the compliance officer, right? I was the one that was making sure she was getting what she needed. But to your point, though, I really see where, especially we've got a couple patients that their delusions part of their delusions are that every court is a criminal court, right? They don't really distinguish between probate and criminal. And so they always think they're going to jail. And so you can see, in retrospect, you look at it and say, well, no wonder they were so hesitant, because they think I'm putting them in jail every time, which of course that's not helpful. So having that feedback is really So, you know, because to just hear from everybody that's been doing it and successful and how you're becoming successful is so helpful for us. So that's been very eye-opening.
Terrific.
Can I ask a follow-up question on the Zooming? We've had this raised as an issue, and what they're telling me is we want to do Zoom, but we're going to have the case manager go out and sit with the client, that clients don't have smartphones, and we're going to have them all sit around for an hour, and then you're going to call them one by one and let them into the waiting room one by one. I absolutely hate that. I mean, this is about as much Zooming as I can take with everybody in the squares, but to have 40 mentally ill people stuck waiting for me to call them into the room is just not going to work. So can anybody chime in and give me any tips or tricks on how to use the Zoom thing? Because what they're proposing, I think, is just completely unwieldy.
Well, we particularly asked them to see if they could provide for those that didn't have smartphones and couldn't just do it on their own, from their bed or wherever they were. Fortunately, a lot of them have those already. That's worked. And the ones that didn't, the providers been pretty successful about trying to get them a phone that has that capability. I think we have maybe 2 or 3 where the case manager does that. They go out there and they wait for their turn. But we try to get to those people first. So they're in and out very, very quickly, and we know which ones those are, and we move them along so that they're not sitting around waiting. But they're in their personal care home, or wherever they are, and the case manager's outside waiting until we say, yep, we're ready for you. Then they go in and talk with the patient, and that's kind of how we handle it.
Yeah, that's similar to our setup. We basically set aside most of every Wednesday morning for the calls. So we've got a window that stays open, and we'll have the case managers go out. Typically, they prefer to be there with the client because, I think in the interview process, it gives us a chance, one, to talk to the client and then get the caseworkers, case managers assessment there on the spot, and at least get a 3-way conversation going on with the patient. But we found here just about everybody has got the phone and the capability, and sometimes the phone habits can be a little interesting. And the presentation, it's a very, I think, indecorous way to have interviews sometimes, but
Yeah.
at least it's available and people are there. The last time we gathered, I said, I really miss the in-person interviews. And for a lot of people, I know we've lost that very direct personal connection, so that the status conferences now are really just that. It's, we're getting to the bare meat of the matter, but not really having much of an opportunity to develop the relationship. And I do miss that a lot.
Yeah, I remember you saying that last time. And, it's interesting because now we're getting, the next time we do one of these meetings in 4 months, a lot of us hopefully will have been vaccinated. We're now getting to the point where we can actually start thinking about a post-COVID world at some point next year. So I'm really curious whether people think that some of the changes in the way courts are operating are going to remain in effect. Are some of these changes permanent? Is it going to be decisions made that maybe we don't have to do so many of these hearings in person, or is everyone as eager to go back to the old way as Judge McCown is?
I think we're going to be using Zoom and a lot more frequently, and continue to use it after things, whatever normal ends up looking like. I still think we'll continue to use Zoom because in some cases, especially on civil calendars, it's really more efficient. And what I found with AOT is the ones that Zoom, usually the ones that are doing very well, and they're able to do that on their own. The ones that are very high risk or high need, the case managers want to bring them to court to have a live confrontation. Usually the lawyers are usually appearing by Zoom, but at least the court and the client have, it's well distanced from the bench to the table, but at least it's still an in-person contact.
Yeah.
And I stay up on the bench instead of getting down in the well with them. Yeah.
Right. And Judge Stormer, from what I observed recently of your court, it looks like you guys mostly have people coming in, right, to the courtroom.
Well, we did until 2 weeks ago when Ohio just surged all over, and including in our county. So we stopped. And, you know, it is cold here. We don't have that Texas weather or California weather. So, you know, the virus apparently loves the cold. So that's why they're talking about the Zoom, but they have this, I mean, I like the idea of the hybrid, and maybe if people have their own phones. I mean, I'm glad that I got to ask that question because, you know, we're really struggling with it. I like seeing people in person. I think you just, as you all know, get that whole sense of, you know, are they really agitated? I mean, are they seem hiding something? The case manager has to stand next to them, and you're finding out if they really can't stand their case manager, for example. I just don't know that there's a substitute, but at this point, I guess I'm willing to try the Zooming, but I can't see having it. I mean, I'm sure there's a way we can do this where so many are there at 10 and so many are there at 10:15 as opposed to 30 people sitting there for an hour. I just can't imagine being really sick. It's hard enough when you're high functioning and well to do this, but you know, if you're really struggling to try and watch people in a box, I just find that very disconcerting for them.
Right.
One of the
So
things we
what-
did to deal with that was to schedule people on, like, a couple people at 11 o'clock, a couple people at 10:15, 11:15, 11:30, and sort of spread them out so I only have 2 or 3 waiting at a time.
Yeah.
One other strategy that seems to have worked is that the case managers, for the patients that have their own phone, they don't have to sit around in the box and wait for me to get to them. They, the case managers will just text them and say, okay, you're up. Are you ready? You can call in now. And that's worked out because that way they're out doing their thing. They're whatever they're doing. They're getting their hair done. You know, and they take a break and then they call in, and that's worked out.
Yeah.
One thing that was interesting is, you know, pre-COVID, when we had the patients coming into the court, and especially at the beginning, even of 2.0, when there were some service provider issues that were happening, you know, some of the patients would come in and were grumpy and not liking their case manager for whatever reason. And, you know, as a third party, you're sort of like, okay, well, I have to take everything with a grain of salt. Hard to tell exactly what's really going on. You know, he said, she said kind of a thing. But when they're there in their personal care home, and so let's say Crystal, for example, says, you know, I'm just really grumpy because, you know, X, Y, and Z, the care in the personal care home is dirty or blah, 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 blah. And the case manager says, well, no, it's not. It's fine. I went and checked it, you know, and it's fine. Where on Zoom, she could just show me around her room and I could actually see what she was talking about. And so that was an interesting experience. And I got a little bit more of firsthand of what she was dealing with every day. So that was interesting. So I could see for sure a hybrid of using both depending on the person and their situation.
Yeah, I mean, clearly there is an upside to doing it that way. There are trade-offs. I want to acknowledge Judge-elect Yeager, who's joined us from Las Vegas, who's been hearing AOT cases as a special master and was actually just elected to the bench as a full judge. So,
hey everyone.
Thanks so much.
This is Eve Stratton. If I could add a note here.
Of course.
We've been working with Dr. Doug Smith, who Judge Stormer is very familiar with, and we're really trying to do a lot to promote long-term injectables. He's done a couple-year study on the effectiveness of them on the inmate population and the jail population. And an interesting finding is that when they're on long-term injectables, you don't wonder why they're misbehaving if they're, you know, are they on their meds or not. Because it's always, they said always the focus was, are you taking your meds? Are you taking your meds? Are you taking meds? The family, the patient, the treatment person. Now, if they're on an LTI, you know they're on their meds. So what else is going on that's creating this behavior? What else is happening in your life? And they said it's just really changed the focus a lot, which I thought was an interesting finding. And so I'm not sure how much all of you are into using LTIs, but we're putting together an education program for our jails and treatment providers that work in the jails to educate them on the use of LTIs. And Dr. Smith is going to present his 3-year study of how effective they've been.
I have a question. So, you know, a lot of my participants in AOT are so acute that, you know, they're lower functioning, but we do have a number of them that have some real antisocial personality traits. What have the other judges been able to do as far as addressing that? I mean, I don't think MRT is necessarily appropriate because it's so difficult for them to understand. So have there been some things that the other judges have been able to do with that?
Well, I found mostly with significant antisocial, they're not really likely to benefit. And so they don't qualify under our criteria usually. Sometimes that's not really discoverable right away, but if it's part of their diagnosis, it's usually an indicator that they don't meet the criteria of likely to benefit.
Oh, I'm not saying that they're purely antisocial. I'm saying like they have, they're schizophrenic, but they also have those antisocial behaviors, like battering healthcare people and that kind of thing when they end up in the hospital.
Exactly what I was going to say. What happens, we take them because they come out of the hospital, but then they inevitably get arrested within the first 60 days. So once you're arrested, you can't be in my program. We move you over to a mental health court. And I don't mean to laugh at it. It's just
No, right?
a tragic truism right now for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, but like Judge Anderson, if those are presented, they're just not in the program at all. They don't make it, because we've pretty well got a 3-step assessment process. The treatment team will look first, then the attorney ad litem will very often, after the interview say, I think you're a likely candidate. And then ultimately the decision is up to the local provider to say, all right, everything else clicks and it matches. So there are multiple stages to at least figure out if those behaviors are there. And if they then manifest later, sometimes that's a quick trip to the courthouse just to visit and say, hey, wait a minute, what's going on here? And if it's intractable, then we have dropped people from the program.
Yeah, I've just got a few that are like looping, between AOT, they'll pick up a case, they're found incompetent without probability, back to civil commitments, back to AOT, and I'm just having some challenges, I guess I should say, with some of those participants, and was just wondering if there were any other solutions that anyone knew of.
I think it's probably fair to say that that's just par for the course. It's just part of the frustration of operating this kind of court. You're going to have folks
Right.
in that profile who are just not going to be great fits.
Right.
Yeah. I'm curious though about Justice Stratton's point about long-acting injectable, whether that makes it easier to monitor somebody who's under AOT. I would certainly think it would. As Justice Stratton says, it's one less thing on the table that a person has got to worry about from each visit to your court to the next. Have others, I mean, are they available in everyone's jurisdictions, and do they seem to make a difference in terms of how people do?
We have it available for most diagnoses, and a lot of our efforts as we're going through the process is to try to encourage some of our folks to accept long-term. And that's really the battle. They have an objection against getting a needle or not knowing what the side effects would be of long-term, so they're resistant. But we found that if we get them stabilized and they appreciate the services they're getting, they're more inclined to accept the doctor's recommendation, usually after about 3 or 4 months in the program.
Yeah, interesting.
I'm wondering, Judge Stratton, if you could make that study available to all of us. That'd be something I'd like to see and pass on to the doctors that I work with. And this is Joe from El Paso.
I don't have it yet, but Judge Stormer, I imagine you could get it because you're right there with Doug Smith.
Yeah, I can get it. I'd be happy to do that and send it on to Brian.
Yeah, send it to us.
It turns out Summit County is one of the highest utilizers of Invega Sustenna in the country, which has been going on for a long, long time. So he's had a lot of patients to consider. I can tell you that the ones who we have, who we can get to try it, really like it, not only because you only have to get the shot every 3 months, but because they sort of describe that instead of going like this, they feel like they go more like this. It's a slower taper down, and they feel a lot more in control. And I like it because in that 90-day period, they can get engaged in so many other pro-social activities because they're not standing at the doctor or, you know, coming down off the med. So I'm going to email him before I forget. So I'm going to turn away from you while I email Doug Smith.
Thank you.
Yeah, much appreciated. So I have another kind of COVID related question. I remember the last chat we did with Judge Brickhouse from Albuquerque. You talked about how she was just finding that COVID was just taking such a toll on the people that she was seeing in terms of them just not having anything to do, just being isolated was just, obviously it's hard for everybody, but it was just making it so much more difficult for her to keep people engaged in their treatment. You know, felt like people were slipping away just because they had no way to occupy themselves. And I know some of the others had some really good ideas of how that might be dealt with, but I'm wondering if that's gotten worse, if other people are really seeing that and finding that it's, you know, as time goes on and or people are just kind of giving up on even trying to stay isolated.
It's hurt us with terms of especially drug use, especially marijuana use mostly, because they're just so bored sitting at home. We have a couple patients that it's really increasing their stress and decreasing their stability. And we just, you know, all we can do is really keep encouraging them. You know, I have a side effort where I try to encourage our participants, if they don't have one, to accept a bike from our free bike program. But not everybody's willing to go to that level of exercise.
Right. That's a nice thing. And that's certainly something you can do for exercise and isolation.
Yeah.
Right. Our case managers have been really good about dropping off like art supplies and other sort of project type of things at the homes. And the participants have really enjoyed that.
Yeah. What a great thing. I think you might have talked about that last time as well.
Yeah. And they still are doing it. I mean, you'd think that they'd get bored doing the same art project, but they don't.
Like Judge Anderson said about the drug use, the increase in drug use. I'm also a drug court judge, and so obviously we've had our drug courts are greatly having much difficulty. But what we have seen on our mental health dockets is a huge influx of persons with their conditions exacerbated by spice. And just a really, I don't know what the change is in the product, but they are having such, the symptoms are just really, really heightened than anything.
What is that exactly? Is it a, like?
It's synthetic plant. It's a plant material that is basically made to make you high. So it's like, you know, kids can buy it and think it's marijuana, but it's synthetic. So it's the synthetics that are chemically manufactured, and who knows what it's made with. You never can kind of get you never know what you're getting. It's almost
and it's
like
legal and sold in stores?
No, it's not legal.
Okay.
But
we're finding it here still on some store shelves, you know, under the Q2 labels and those. And as Judge Perk is saying, it's, you know, the psychotic side effects to this stuff is just incredible.
we just have a huge influx of it here right now. And whatever the supply chain is that has come into town, we have seen so many hospitalizations and of the, you know, they're catatonic and just, and they're staying catatonic. It's really not good.
I'm curious if you all are seeing a similar trend that we're seeing here. I mean, our numbers are tracking back up in terms of the weekly filings. You know, we're nearly back up to our record year that we saw 3 years ago. But I'm noticing a genuine track toward younger, kind of first-time interaction with the program, and more people actually invoking somewhere in their narrative, you know, the pressures of COVID. But the fact that we're seeing more 18, 19, 20-year-olds in their first interaction is really interesting. I'm just curious if everybody else is seeing that same kind of trend.
So Judge McGowan, are you talking about specifically people coming into AOT, or do you mean people showing up in hospitals? I mean,
Showing up in hospitals, kind of in
Yeah,
the
gotcha.
preliminary, our protective custody screening.
right.
Same here.
You know,
Uh,
I'm not seeing it in El Paso, and we've been ground zero for a while. I think we're in the international news because we got hit so hard with COVID. Our docket has remained pretty much the same as it always has been. And I'm wondering why, because I keep hearing that other people's communities are being impacted from a mental health standpoint. Our docket is the same or even smaller than it has been in the past. And I'm wondering if it means that people aren't seeking mental health treatment here.
Do you take attempted suicides?
Oh, yeah.
That's what we're seeing the big spike in. It's awful. I mean, we're seeing just started in the summer and it just got really much worse in October.
Yeah. Our docket is pretty much the same as it's always been.
That's interesting.
Count your blessings.
Well, they say we have lots of lithium in our water out here. So, maybe that's part of it.
El Paso is just getting hit so hard by COVID right now. I mean,
Yeah, although our numbers are tracking down the
oh,
last
that's good to hear.
week. We'll see what happens in 2 weeks after all the folks that got together for Thanksgiving.
Right.
Ours just keep going up here, so.
Well, I have family in El Paso who I'm sure you're happy to know I did not visit this year as we usually do. So, Betsy, I think you had a COVID-related question about family engagement. Am I right? Do you want to maybe put something on the table?
Sure. No, I was just curious. I know certainly you, Judge Stormer, have been in your courtroom often enough to know that, a lot of your folks come in with their family members into the courtroom. And I'm just wondering, are you able to engage them now that you're doing some of your hearings over the phone? Or if anybody else is able to do that?
We haven't done any over the phone or by Zoom. We're just starting to look at it. But that's another one of the reasons I'm reluctant, to have a parent. Because of COVID, there's all these precautions and masks and sanitizing and only one person. You only bring one family member with you. But, they have access to a NAMI representative who's here. There's so much information you can get from the parents who, the patient standing in front of you and verbalizing how well they're doing and mom is going. So, it's hard. There's no substitute for it. We're all waiting to get, like Brian said, hopefully over soon. But I think that's a big loss. And I don't think we're going to be able to do it with Zoom. So I know some of you are Zooming. Do you let the family members in?
Yeah, we do in El Paso. We just had our mental health docket this morning, and we had guardians for some of the patients and parents for others. Without them, it's kind of hard to prove a case if you're on a final commitment hearing because you need that evidence of overt acts and it can't be through hearsay. So we've had good participation from parents and guardians we use GoToMeeting for mental health actually instead of Zoom, but same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have a question about you saying you have NAMI representatives.
Mm-hmm.
What do they do?
They so there's different things that are happening. We don't do the commitment hearing in my court. We do those in the hospitals. So my magistrates go out to the hospital. So what you're talking about, Judge Strelitz, doesn't happen in my courtroom. Mine is only after you've been put in the program. So the parents will bring them, and amazingly enough, probably a third to 45% of them have never heard of NAMI. So I actually have someone from NAMI in the courtroom who can immediately go and talk to that parent right now in real time, even sometimes while I'm talking to the patient, and talk to them about the programming and the support, which is a revelation for the parents who've been struggling in the dark for years sometimes. I think it's wonderful that they're willing to do that for us. And my NAMI representative would be happy to talk to anybody you want them to talk to, because she's utterly committed to this program. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, Betsy could tell you, because you know Leslie, but Betsy is certainly as knowledgeable as Leslie is.
Yeah. Judge Stormer, could you talk a little bit about Leslie's role at the front end of the process? So if a family contacts her and they think that their loved one would be a good candidate, can you talk a little bit about what Leslie does with that information?
She will hook them up with a healthcare professional who can meet with the family in their own home and talk to the loved one and help them make a decision about whether or not they can sign an affidavit. 99% of the time, the parents will not sign an affidavit saying, we think my child should be committed, but she can then start the process so that we can have the person evaluated. Frankly, at this point, every person who we want to have evaluated has had to be hospitalized. So they're just, the parents wait so long that they're terribly ill. And, but she is the beginning of the process to get someone committed if necessary. Her goal is not to get people committed, by the way. Her goal is to just get them to treatment. It just happens that by the time the parents call, their child is so ill that hospitalization is necessary.
So that's an interesting concept. It never occurred to me that you would have family members coming to the status conferences. We have a lot of the patients that won't give consent for anybody to talk to their family, but the ones that do, so have you had any resistance from patients wanting family to come?
Yeah, and if they say, I don't want her to come up here, then she doesn't come up here. But that doesn't mean Leslie can't go out in the hall and talk to the parent while I'm talking to the client. So I think.
Do you have that on all of them, or just the ones that express interest in having family come? Or, I mean, how do you decide that?
It's really up to them if they have family come. A lot of them, the first time they have a family member with them because they need a ride and they have to hook up with their case manager who can provide transportation. So the family member is in the courtroom with them initially just because they brought them in. And under COVID, they can have one person come in. So if they say, I don't want her up here, they don't come up, and I never address them directly. But Leslie can go and immediately talk to that family member. Otherwise, if the patient is comfortable, I have mom or dad or brother, sister, whoever come up and stand next to them and say, do you have any questions? And how would you like me to think about some of these things? And they're really great for the status conferences because they say, oh my gosh, she's doing so much better, and compliment the patient. And, you know, it's not just me talking to them. There's families sort of appreciating the fact that they're doing a really good job. I like it a lot personally. We did it in drug court too. I don't know if you do that, Judge Burke, or not, but it was always helpful to me to have somebody who was in the house, even if they're kind of rolling their eyes. It's like you're getting that little bit of information about what they're saying.
It's good. How do you get past the confidentiality? Does the patient have to waive it?
We just don't ever talk about that. And I don't know, it might sound terrible, but you know, they have a lawyer. We have a lawyer available for them. This is their ride. Their ride comes into the courtroom with them, just like it was a drug court. Their ride's in the courtroom with them, and we take it from there. If there's one second of hesitation, believe me, we just stop it. But we don't say, hey, do you want to keep this confidential? We just say, hey, oh, look, mom's here. Do you want her to come on up? And it really hasn't been a problem. We've never had pushback from disability rights, although I'm not sure that they know what we're doing, but we've just never had anybody really object to this procedure. And it kind
Judge Stormer is doing status conferences in open court, you know, mental health court style. It's like anybody could.
Ours isn't open.
Right.
Yeah. Ours isn't open.
Mrs. Anderson, yours is open?
No. I have a question about that, because some of the times we allow family members in if the client agrees to let somebody else in, but sometimes it's parents who are a big share of the problem. And
I agree.
Causes stressors for the client, and living with their parents is often part of the problem that keeps them unstable. And I don't know, how do you deal with that issue? Because oftentimes the parents are in total denial of needing any kind of counseling or treatment.
Well, I think that's why we like having the parent there, because we get that extra bit of information. And, you know, if they're saying he's not sick and the kid's going, I think I need help, and that's one thing. That doesn't happen too often. Usually if mom and dad are saying he's not sick, he's saying he's not sick too. And we now know we need to start to separate that thread. We maybe are unusual in the fact that we just have everybody come in. We don't make a record. There's no lawyer present. These are all post-commitment, you know, status hearings, if you will. There was some initial discussion. Our stakeholders agreed to this, by the way. Our caregivers agreed to it. Our case managers have agreed to it. So NAMI agreed to it when we were setting the program up. But there was some concern. They said, well, you know, other people are going to see that, you know, Eleanor's a client or a patient. And my response was, well, you know, they kind of run into him in the hallway of the treatment provider. So I'm not sure that there's a lot of secrecy about that. And eventually no one really had response to that comment. So our law doesn't prohibit me from doing it. And I've been a judge for 30 years. And my feeling is if the law doesn't tell me I can't, then it's clearly open for me to do so. So that's kind of how we did that.
Well, you know, in a lot of states, the law says that a mental health civil commitment shall be a confidential proceeding.
But that's separate from what I do. That's why I've divided it. That's why the civil commitments are handled off-site, and what I do is a status hearing on your commitment to the board. It's not a commitment hearing. I don't make the decision at that time if you're going to be in or out. As a matter of fact, I never make that decision deliberately. So the person who makes that decision is not the person who's talking to you. But I recognize that's a luxury that not everyone has.
Right, understood. But it's definitely something we hear a lot, you know, when we kind of explain the AOT model. And there are resource issues that sometimes make it difficult and more expensive for people to have counsel at all these status hearings if they're going to do them every couple of weeks. And, you know, often when we try and encourage people, well, you know, there's no real need to have counsel there because it's an informal chat with the judge. It's not an opportunity for the judge to rule on the case in any way. Not everybody's comfortable with that, especially the patient's attorneys who just hate the idea of their client being with a judge without them present.
Well, we would love to have them watch our court at any moment so they can see why they can just go work on something else.
Yeah, I think that's what we've been telling people is, you know, come for a while and you will develop comfort with it when you see what's actually happening at these meetings.
Funny, they have that comfort with the drug courts, but they don't have the comfort with the mental health here.
Interesting.
I find that like it's public defenders in most all of our cases. And when a PD gets assigned to AOT court, it takes them a couple of weeks, but after a few status conferences, they sort of get it, that this is really beneficial. And so they become part of the support team instead of just an adversarial side guy.
Right.
I'm lucky I have one person who is assigned to my mental health court, one PD, and she does all the cases. So she is familiar with the persons and their history and how frequently they're coming back. So she's a proponent of getting them into AOT.
I just had a public defender in Florida where we're helping set up a grantee, tell me that she's not going to allow her clients to stipulate ever to the petition. She's going to treat everyone as a contested petition, even if her client says, I want this, I want to do this.
Right.
And
It's not going to last long.
Yeah, I'd say experience will probably change that at some point.
I'm hoping so. It was hard for me to get my head around how you could, when your client is telling you, yes, I agree, I meet these criteria. At that point, there were no facts in dispute.
It's hard to see how that's acting in the best interest of the patient.
It
They're
really,
going to be short hearings anyway. The client says, I'm stipulating, and she says, going to have to sit there, but she'll learn.
yeah.
I'm going to have to jump off. It is so nice
Okay.
to see you all. I really look forward to seeing everybody again and have a nice holiday season. We have enough snow for all of you up here.
Oh, already?
Keep it there.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, I
Thank
think we're
you.
probably ready to wrap up unless anybody has any other issues they want to throw on the table.
Good to see everybody, and congratulations for all the new programs. As I told Judge Parsons yesterday, it has become the favorite part of my job. I think the longer you do this and the more of the results you see, we see so many tragic stories, across the desk every day, that when you see these successes in outpatient, it really makes up for everything else.
For sure. That's beautiful. And I see Judge Prashner from Austin is joining us just as we're about to wrap up. So
my timing is exquisite as always.
Well, thank you.
Keep my lunch.
Okay. Anything you want to say real quickly about how things are going in Austin? You guys have rolled out now?
Well, kind of. I was interested in hearing from my brothers and sisters around the country how you get folks into the program. And what your criteria for admission are. We had a floor of 3 prior commitments, and we are getting no business. And I was in a huge fight yesterday with our local mental health organization about maybe loosening the criteria a bit so we could broaden the pool, from 3 down to 2 prior commitments, and was getting a lot of pushback. And they were talking about, the terms of the SAMHSA grant and all that. And
that's not accurate. There's nothing in the SAMHSA grant that says they can only bring in people who've had 3 prior hospitalizations. Not at all.
Well, that's what I smoked out of them eventually. And then there was some other reason that I didn't understand. And then they were talking about fudging numbers. We have, outpatient orders that are not part of our AOT program that don't have the kinds of services that the LMHA is supposed to provide. They were saying, well, why don't we count those toward our numbers so that we can make SAMHSA happy? And I said, good God. Anyway, so I was really glad we were going to have a meeting today, and I would love to hear from you folks, how you got folks into the program and how long it took you.
Well, Judge, I don't want to speak for Jenny Beyer with our MHMR here in Tarrant County, but she's been such a go-to resource for all of the new programs.
Jenny Beyer?
Jenny Beyer, but we will offer whatever, moral support and anything else from Tarrant County. The
ideas would be great. Give me Jenny's.
Jenny, I'll email it to you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, email. If not, you can send it through me and I'll get it to him.
To her, yeah. And I think as Judge Parsons and I were talking yesterday, I mean, I think count ourselves very lucky up here in that from the get-go, we had a complete buy-in from the hospital, the courts, and MHMR. And until you get to that point, it's going to be a tug of war. And
how did you convince the doctors at the hospitals that this was a good option for their folks? I do commitment hearings, and I asked the doctors, well, have you thought about doing an outpatient order, an AOT order for this person? And they go, oh, really? As though they had no outreach.
Well, again, I don't want to throw more on Brian, but what saved us up here was at the very outset of the program. Brian sat down and we had a meeting with several of our attorneys ad litem, doctors, everybody around the table who would have been part of the process. And Brian sort of laid out, this is your ideal, go for this. And that's what we aimed for. And if you can pull him in to have some kind of collective training session with everybody involved in the process, because all you need to start with are 2 or 3 disciples and it will grow from there.
Yeah, and obviously I'm very happy to do that remotely for one.
Yeah, I agree. If you don't have all the parts talking to each other, that's where you end with roadblocks. And that's part of what we struggled with in our 1.0 when we did it pre this current time. But even now though, we do struggle a bit. All of our referrals right now come from the Harris County Psychiatric Center, which is our indigent mental health hospital. And we haven't branched out past that because we wanted to work out all the kinks that were possible to work out before we tried to get bigger. But even with those doctors, we've struggled a bit because there are some doctors that just truly don't believe in AOT. We've had feedback from doctors like, I don't like AOT. I don't like the concept. It doesn't work. I don't dig it. But then we've just had other ones where like you were saying, they just needed somebody to get in their face and say, hey, we're here, send us somebody. And so, our court staff for our mental health court is actually housed at the psychiatric center. So we have a little bit of a location that's helpful for that. But in addition to that, because of the SAMHSA grant, we were able to add a body for us. And her main role is to go and woo the doctors in the hospital. So she spends her day on the units, trying to meet with the doctors, bringing them donuts, whatever hey, chatting with them on the lunch line. And just that one-on-one, interaction has helped, and she even said, listen, the ones that don't like AOT, I'm never going to get to them. So I'm just going to focus my energy on the ones that are even remotely interested. Even if they just want to just chat me up, that's where we're going to start. And we're going to try to, woo them and to give us some referrals. And so that's how we've handled it. But just know that even with that, you may run into some resistance from some docs for who knows why.
Can't understand why anyone would not want to take advantage of this.
Yeah, especially if they're seeing, you would imagine they'd be frustrated to see the same patients coming back to the hospital again and again. And, what else have you got to work with this group other than this program? It amazes me as well that there'd be resistance.
It's new and it's different.
Open up your criteria significantly. Like the California criteria under our statute allows for many different sources for referrals. It could be family, it could be a probation officer, it could be a treatment provider. There's a long list you can refer, including now judges in the new law when it comes into effect.
Yeah.
And, you don't have to, part of the criteria is what I think, 2 hospitalizations within a couple of years or threats of violence or self-harm that may, are taken seriously.
Right.
And that gives
Even
you
broader in Texas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Judge. Sorry.
I'm just thinking about this, trying to process it.
Yeah.
But we'll get you connected. It's going to work. The light bulb is going to go off with an advocate at some point pretty quickly, and it's going to start falling into place.
And it's good for us to know about this as well, because, we're working with Integral Care as a TA provider.
I know you are.
Yeah. So to get your perspective on your
Very
frustration
helpful.
is helpful to us. And, Amy has even just suggested to me in the chat box, we have a psychiatrist in New York City who has been doing some work with us who might be really helpful. And, sometimes it just takes another psychiatrist who they relate to as a peer who works in the mental health system. It's going to mean more to them to hear it from them that this is something that they should embrace than anyone in any other role.
This would be Dr. Was it Garcia who in Queens?
Garza, yeah. Danny Garza, yeah.
I've got to go into court. So thank you all. I really appreciate getting
Thank you,
this.
Judge.
Thank you, everyone. I think we'll wrap up and
Thank you.
and happy holidays, everyone. And hopefully when we see each other, we'll have made a lot of progress on COVID.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Amy, thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Take care.
Thank you.
Judge Parsons and McGowan, I really appreciate it.
We'll good.